Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the gilded salons of Buckingham Palace, an event of exceptional magnitude was in full swing, the jubilee of 70 years of the reign of King Edward V. Never, since the advent of the modern monarchy, has a sovereign known such a long or such a remarkable reign. Beneath Victorian frescoed ceilings, amidst gilded moldings and antique Persian rugs, the grand ballroom shone. The immense crystal chandeliers, brought down especially for the occasion, cast shards of light on the faces of the guests, dressed in silk gowns and impeccable tuxedos. The British elite, royal families from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, as well as heads of state from around the world, crowded into the room, glasses of champagne in hand, their smiles carefully calculated under the watchful eye of the cameras. The journalists, posted on the upper balconies and in the discreet corners of the room, tirelessly filmed every handshake, every social laugh, every toast offered. Nothing was to escape them, neither the Queen Alexandra, sitting in her state chair, nor the dukes and duchesses of the House of Windsor, nor the slightest minister or ambassador. Everything seemed frozen in a sort of perfectly orchestrated ballet, where every gesture had been rehearsed for weeks. In this setting of splendor and prestige, the royal guard stood watch, straight as statues. In scarlet-red uniforms, their torsos adorned with the insignia of the monarchy and wearing the famous bearskin caps, they were the very embodiment of protocol and discipline. Their reputation as legendary impassivity was intact, not an eyelash fluttered, not a muscle moved, despite the heat and the stares fixed on them. But in the midst of this brilliant, almost unreal crowd, one silhouette stood out. A young black woman, discreet and determined, progressed slowly through the room, brushing past the columns and the guests. Her name was Elena Carter. She wasn't a noblewoman, nor an official guest. No one here knew her name, much less her story. The granddaughter of a forgotten royal maid, Elena carried a heavy secret that only a handful of families, now almost all gone, still knew. His presence was no coincidence. She wasn't there to admire the palace's gilding, nor to gaze at the queen's gown or the royal jewels. She hadn't come for the toasts, nor for the speeches. She had come to accomplish a mission that had been entrusted to her from a very young age. Elena had grown up on the streets of Brixton, South London, an area where cultures from all over the world mingled in a whirl of music, color, and sometimes social struggle. His life had nothing to do with the world of Buckingham. His grandmother, Maya Carter, had raised her alone, in a small apartment located above an African clothing store. Maya, a mysterious woman with lively eyes and a past surrounded by shadows, had always told him, "One day you will understand why our family must always watch, always listen. We are the sentinels that no one sees." Elena had never taken those words seriously, until her grandmother, on her deathbed, revealed the whole truth to her. Maya Carter had once belonged to the Crown Watchers, a secret order formed in the shadow of past wars. A circle of protectors, hidden among servants, gardeners, seamstresses, and even some members of the guard, whose mission was to silently watch over the royal family, away from the spotlight, away from honors. Officially, the order had disappeared after a terrible political crisis in the 1960s, when an internal conspiracy nearly overthrew the monarchy. The very existence of the Watchers had been erased from historical records, their members dispersed or silenced. But Maya had survived. And with her, forbidden knowledge. Before she breathed her last, she confided to Elena the last secret of the Watchers. A forgotten signal. A simple gesture, yet capable of awakening the memory of ancient protocols. A silent code, transmitted only to those who still bore the invisible oath. Tonight, in this palace where everything seemed under control, Elena knew the time had come. She had discovered what few would have dared to imagine, a plot of unprecedented magnitude, the ultimate goal of which was to assassinate the King Edward VI's full celebration, before the eyes of the whole world. Blood pounded in her temples as she slowly approached the stage. In his pocket, his fist clenched. She felt the weight of her grandmother's gaze, that of forgotten generations, on her shoulders. She knew what she had to do. She knew that once the signal was executed, there would be no turning back. Tonight, Elena Carter, daughter of Brixton and descendant of the Watchers, would awaken a ghost from the past, and perhaps change the fate of the British monarchy. As Buckingham Palace's great clocks, synchronized with the chimes of Big Ben, struck 10 o'clock in the evening, a shudder ran through the hall. Conversations stopped. Musicians paused, and journalists trained their cameras on center stage. The King Edward V, draped in his midnight blue cape with a golden coat of arms, slowly rose from his throne. In his hand, a chiseled crystal cup containing a vintage wine specially chosen for the event. All eyes focused on him. His voice, deep and solemn, rose in perfect silence, as he raised his cup to make the long-awaited toast. Tonight, we celebrate not only a reign, but the loyalty of a people. To the continuity, peace, and future of the nation. The entire room held its breath. Camera flashes popped softly, capturing the moment the monarchy was about to write a new chapter in history. But at this precise moment, at the heart of this fragile harmony, Elena Carter took the main. In the golden light of the chandeliers, her gesture seemed almost innocuous, like that of a guest trying to discreetly attract attention. Yet his movements were calculated, precise. She closed her fist, struck her own heart twice with a firm gesture, then lowered her hand, extending 3 fingers toward the ground, at a sharp angle, without hesitation. Le signal ancestral. A forgotten gesture, erased from memory, banned for decades, but charged with a power that would break the protocol of the most conservative kingdom on the planet. Around her, no one seemed to react. A few guests looked at her briefly, thinking it was just a nervous tic or an awkward movement. Some barely raised their eyebrows before turning their attention back to the king. More Sir Ezekiel, Zeke Morgan, Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Guard, saw everything. From the top of the platform where he stood guard, Zeke, this man with the steely gaze and a face marked by years of service, met Elena's eyes. In the second, he understood. Zeke's blood freezes, his heart freezes. This signal. He had seen it. Not in the streets of London, nor on the battlefield, but in the confidential archives off the palace, deep in the basements, in a forbidden file whose simple consultation required 2 codes and royal authorization. A gesture inscribed in the darkest legends of the British monarchy, the signal of the watchman, believed to have disappeared after the secret order was dissolved in the 1960s. A gesture associated with matters that even current heads of state no longer mention. Yet he had just been executed, here, before his eyes, in the most secure room in England. Zeke felt sweat beading on the back of his neck. Every fiber of his body was screaming at him to stay where he was, to stand, to hold the line. But his soldier's instinct, honed by years of loyalty, took over. With a movement both abrupt and solemn, he left his position. A shocked murmur went through the room. The guests couldn't believe their eyes. Never in recent history had a royal guard left his post during an official ceremony, let alone during a royal address. Zeke walked down the steps purposefully, without deviating from his path, his gaze fixed on Elena. He pushed through the stunned crowd, knocking into a French diplomat who loudly protested. The murmurs intensified, and the cameras rolled, capturing every second of the surreal scene. And then, with a stunning gesture, Sir Ezekiel Morgan stopped in front of Elena. Without a word, he knelt down. He, the man nicknamed Buckingham Wall, bent his knee to a stranger. The shock in the room was absolute. Some guests let out a cry of astonishment, others froze, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice deep and tense, barely audible over the surrounding tumult. Elena stared at him with icy calm, without the slightest hesitation. Elena Carter. Granddaughter of Maya Carter, former protector of the crown, she replied in a firm voice. She deliberately let a silence linger before adding, in a tone heavy with meaning. "The king is in immediate danger." At these words, Zeke's face fell. He, who had seen war, foiled attacks, diplomatic crises, he had never felt such vertigo. Around them, the guests whispered, the guards hesitated, the king himself watched the scene, speechless. But Zeke knew he didn't have a second to lose. With a sharp gesture, he grabbed Elena's arm and declared authoritatively, loud enough to cover the whispers. "Follow me." Zeke, without letting go of Elena's hand, led her out of the great hall under the incredulous gaze of the audience. They passed through a series of hushed corridors lined with portraits of rulers and dignitaries of the past. The stone walls, covered with ancestral tapestries, seemed to close in their silence around them. No guard stopped them. The mere presence of Zeke, with his gold-embroidered insignia on his shoulder, was enough to dismiss anyone who stood in their way. But the further they walked, the heavier, almost stifling, the atmosphere became. Elena felt her heart pounding, but she held on, driven by the conviction that everything depended on her now. Zeke led her to a massive door hidden behind a mahogany bookcase. Without a word, he removed a black gauntlet from his right hand, revealing a discreet tattoo on his wrist, the encrypted symbol of the Supreme Guard. He pressed his palm against a biometric reader hidden in the molding. A click was heard. The bookcase slowly pivoted, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the bowels of the palace. "No one can know what's going on here," Zeke hissed, giving Elena a hard look. They descended several steps, then emerged into a circular room carved from rough stone. A former war bunker, forgotten by the general public. In this room, a security console sat in the center, surrounded by black screens and levers protected by mechanical locks. It was the Royal Emergency Room, activated only in case of extreme crisis. Zeke closed the door behind them and engaged a manual lock, sealing the place off from the rest of the palace. "Now speak," he ordered, his jaw clenched. Elena took a deep breath, then pulled an old silver pocket watch from the inside pocket of her coat, adorned with a coat of arms faded by time. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said in a vibrant voice. She carefully opened the watch. Inside, hidden within the mechanism, was a micromemory card, seemingly innocuous but protected by a holographic seal. "My father intercepted this message 2 weeks ago. He risked everything to get it to me before he disappeared." His hand was shaking slightly. Zeke took the card and inserted it into a highly secure reader built into the console. The screen lit up, displaying a dated, austere interface. An audio recording started. Two men's voices, calm, almost icy, began a low conversation in polite but threatening English. "Everything is ready. The king's wine will be exchanged just before the midnight toast. The tests are clear. The poison will act slowly, leaving no immediate traces. The royal guard will be blamed for negligence. Sir Morgan himself will be accused. His military background will facilitate media manipulation. As soon as the crown falls, we will install a republican government. The monarchy will never rise again." Zeke blanched as the words echoed through the room. The names spoken at the end of the message completely shattered him internally. Lord Kenneth Ashford and Sir Marcus Halloway, two of the most powerful figures in Parliament. Respected, untouchable, and clearly ready for anything. He stood frozen for a moment, his fists clenched, his usually impassive eyes filled with cold rage. "They want to blame a palace guard," Elena breathed, her voice tight. She stopped, then added in a harder tone, her eyes fixed on his. "On you, Sir Morgan." Zeke's face hardened further. He realized everything had been meticulously planned. His loyalty, his reputation, his position, everything was going to be sacrificed. He took a deep breath, pushing back the anguish and anger. "Very well," he said in a cold, almost robotic voice. "It's time to remind them what the monarchy can do when threatened." Without waiting, he turned a key hidden under the desk, revealing a red button sealed by a glass capsule. "Procedure Black Swan activated," he announced solemnly. This protocol, erased from official archives, was known only to the highest circles. It had been designed for situations where the very existence of the monarchy was at stake. By activating the procedure, Zeke triggered a series of automatic orders. Special units, infiltrated among the personnel, received an encrypted alert. Within 15 minutes, loyalist palace agents, disguised as servants, gardeners, and even musicians, quietly surrounded Lord Ashford and Sir Halloway, who were subdued without a sound. The booby-trapped wine was seized and analyzed in the next room. Experts confirmed its lethal nature. In the ballroom, the ceremony resumed, as if nothing had happened. The king made his toast, unaware that he had escaped death. The crowd cheered, unaware of the tragedy averted. Deep in the shadows of the palace, Zeke Morgan and Elena Carter had just saved the English monarchy. But for Zeke, a chilling truth still resonated in his mind. They were ready to do anything to erase the crown, and they almost succeeded. After the tumult and hushed outbursts of the ceremony, Buckingham Palace gradually returned to its solemn calm. The festivities were still in full swing in the great halls, but in the private corridors, a serious atmosphere had settled. The King Edward V, his face marked by exhaustion but his eyes shining with a new intensity, summoned Zeke Morgan and Elena Carter to his private office, a sanctuary mingled with ancient riches and mementos of past reigns. The heavy, solid oak door slammed shut behind them, cutting off the outside world. The king sat behind his desk, staring at Zeke with a penetrating gaze. "You have broken the most sacred of rules, Sir Morgan," he began in a deep, almost painful voice. "There are protocols that no guard must ever break, or risk losing all honor, and sometimes more." Zeke stood there, motionless, a wall of silent respect. "Yes, Your Majesty," he replied calmly, without flinching. "But it was necessary. To protect the crown. To protect your life." The king looked away for a moment, then turned to Elena, who was observing the scene with a maturity well beyond her 19 years. "And you, young lady," he asked, his voice softening, "what do you know of these shadows that hover over us? What do you know about this past that many prefer to forget?" Elena took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her gaze was steady. "Your Majesty," she began in a clear voice, "what I am about to tell you is a story that few have the right to hear." She then told the story of the Crown Watchers, this secret order charged, in the shadows, with watching over the royal family throughout the centuries, even in the darkest hours. She spoke of the solemn promise made by her family, passed down from generation to generation, that silent oath of protection and sacrifice. She spoke of her grandmother, Maya Carter, who had risked her life to save a young prince during a forgotten rebellion, and who, until her dying breath, had protected the secret of the Watchers. Then her voice deepened as she revealed the recent plot uncovered by her father, a devoted man who had paid with his life for his loyalty to the crown. The king listened, his hands clasped, absorbing every word, every detail, the silence stretching between them like a veil. For several long minutes he remained silent, his gaze lost in the ancient tapestries, as if searching the past for answers to this troubled present. Finally, he looked up, staring at Elena with a new seriousness. "I ignored you," he said slowly, almost regretfully, "because your family has been erased from our archives, like so many others whom history has deemed unworthy of memory. But tonight, thanks to you, thanks to your courage, I am still alive." He stood up, taking a few steps into the room, then turned to Zeke. "Sir Morgan," he ordered authoritatively. "From now on, she is under your direct protection. Teach him everything you know. The monarchy must sometimes rely on those whom history has erased." Zeke's gaze hardened, mixing respect and responsibility. Elena felt the weight of destiny fall on her shoulders, aware that her life had just changed forever. The king added, almost in a low voice, like a shared secret. "The past has its shadows, but it is they, in these shadows, who maintain the light." A few months had passed since that fateful night when Elena Carter, with a discreet but far-reaching gesture, had changed the course of history. In the shadow of the gilding and tapestries, far from prying eyes, Elena had been officially named Special Advisor on Crown Protection, a title that seems almost innocuous, intended to mask the real scope of its mission. This role, kept secret even from the closest members of the government, was known only to an extremely restricted circle of royal advisors and the most loyal guard. The general public, however, knew nothing. The newspapers talked about the festivities, the new royal projects, the state visits, but they never suspected that a young woman from the working-class districts of London was now playing a crucial role at Buckingham Palace. Yet, in the private, hushed salons of the palace, whispers circulated. Some former servants, maids, valets, and members of the guard, whispered among themselves. "Did you hear? The girl from Brixton. The one who saved the king with that famous forgotten signal. It's incredible. How could a young woman with no title, no blue blood, have gotten in here? She trains every day in the secret gardens, near the old greenhouses. These rumors, although never officially confirmed, spread like wildfire in confidential circles. Elena, she had changed. She was no longer that shy teenager who walked the colorful streets of Brixton. Under the strict supervision of Sir Ezekiel Zeke Morgan, Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Guard and now mentor, she had immersed herself in a world where history and mystery intertwined. Buckingham's secret gardens were his sanctuary. There, under Zeke's watchful eye, she trained in the ancient arts, ceremonial staff handling, silent surveillance techniques, and even meditation exercises inherited from the Watchers. Her progress was remarkable. Every day, her body and mind were being shaped into a peerless protector, able to read the invisible dangers that threatened the crown. The complicity between Elena and Zeke was palpable, imbued with a deep mutual respect. He, an experienced man with a past full of sacrifices, saw in her the future, the hope of a monarchy protected by invisible but invincible ramparts. In the corridors of the palace, some high dignitaries were beginning to understand that the English monarchy had found in Elena an unexpected ally, a modern-day sentinel. And as the days passed, the young woman in the shadows gradually took her rightful place, ready to face the next storms that would appear on the horizon. For in this ancient kingdom, the true guardians did not always wear the crown. Sometimes, they remained in the shadows.